hour at 12:43 in the afternoon. I could see her through the side window before I opened it. Black sedan in the driveway, still running. Diane Caldwell in the same blazer she'd probably been wearing since 6 that morning, standing in front of a two-car garage in a neighborhood she'd never had any reason to visit, about to ask the man she fired 5 hours ago to please turn her factories back on. I let her knock twice, then I opened the door. That's where this story ends. But to understand why she was standing there, and why I made her wait, you have to go back to 7:14 that same morning. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 54 years old. I've spent the last 22 years building industrial automation systems for manufacturing plants across Pennsylvania and Michigan, not the glamorous end of engineering, not the kind of work that gets you invited to speak at conferences or quoted in trade magazines. The kind that keeps production lines moving at 3 in the morning when everyone else is asleep and something decides to stop working. I was in my garage when it happened. 7:14 a.m. Tuesday, coffee in my left hand, multimeter in my right, checking a fault on a relay board I'd been meaning to get to for 2 weeks. My phone buzzed on the workbench. Email notification, subject line, notice of contract termination, 5 lines, no phone call, no meeting, no warning. Just 5 lines that ended with, effective today, your services are no longer required. Final payment will be processed per contract terms. Thank you for your service. I read it once, set my phone face down on the workbench, looked at the control panel mounted on the wall in front of me, the one I built by hand, board by board, over 3 years. Every relay, every PLC interface, every signal wire running to terminals, I crimped myself. Then I picked up my coffee and finished it. To understand what was actually sitting in that garage, you need to understand how I got there. I left the last full-time job I ever had in 2001, 12 years at a steel plant outside Pittsburgh. Good work, good people. And then one morning the plant manager called everyone into the main bay and told us the facility was closing. 800 people. Gone in 4 months because a board of directors in a city none of us had ever been to decided the numbers didn't add up anymore. I spent 2 years doing contract work wherever I could find it. Then in 2003, I went fully independent. Built my first custom automation system for a plastics manufacturer in western Pennsylvania. Word travels slow in manufacturing, but it travels far. By 2006, I had more work than I could take on. I've never had a website, never needed one. My clients find me when their production line is down and whoever they hired before me couldn't fix it. That's exactly how I ended up with Keystone Fabrication Group. Howard Nolan called me on a Wednesday afternoon in 2019. He was their VP of operations. Real operations, not the kind that looks good on a resume. 28 years on the floor before he moved into management. His voice had a specific quality I've heard from a lot of good people over the years. Quiet, controlled. The sound of someone staring at a problem they've run out of ideas for. Walter, he said, we just failed a second safety audit in 14 months. OSHA has us on a watch list. Our integration system is 4 different platforms that don't talk to each other, and I need someone who actually understands how these machines work, not another consultant who learned manufacturing from a slide deck. I drove out the next morning. The problems were obvious inside the first hour. Their 12 facilities across Pennsylvania and Michigan were running on a patchwork of systems from 3 different decades. PLCs that couldn't communicate with newer equipment. Robotic welding arms on line 3 operating on timing sequences that hadn't been updated since 2011. Quality control checkpoints that existed on paper, but weren't connected to anything capable of actually halting a production run if a spec was missed. I told Howard what it would take. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked 2 questions. How long and what does the contract look like? 20 months to build. And the contract works like this. You lease operational access to the system I build. The system itself, every line of code, every PLC configuration, every hardware interface stays mine. You're paying for the output, not the engine. Howard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that's fair. I wouldn't hand you the title to my truck just because you changed the oil. We shook hands and I got to work. I spent 20 months building them something that actually fit how they operated. Custom PLC programming across every production line. Machine sensor integration feeding a predictive maintenance schedule so they'd know a motor was trending toward failure 3 weeks out, not after it took down a shift. Robotic sequencing on the welding lines that cut the error rate from 2.3% to 0.1%. A production scheduling engine that coordinated all 12 facilities so they weren't duplicating component runs at 4 plants, while 2 others sat idle waiting for parts. 200,000 lines of code, all of it running on hardware I built myself. Hardware that lived in my garage, not on their servers, not in their cloud. In a converted 2-car garage 20 minutes from Keystone's main facility, on circuit boards I assembled by hand, running through terminal blocks I wired myself, controlled by a panel I could reach out and touch from where I'm sitting right now. Howard understood exactly what that meant. He signed without hesitation. The results came fast and they stayed. Inside 6 months of going live, Keystone cleared the OSHA watch list. Scrap rate dropped from 2.3% to 0.1%. Line downtime, which had been running at 11%, roughly industry average for a plant their age, fell to just under 3%. The production scheduling engine alone saved them an estimated $2.1 million in the first year by eliminating duplicate component runs across facilities. Howard would call me every quarter, not to complain, not to renegotiate, but to talk through capacity questions. How much more throughput could Line 6 handle before the predictive maintenance thresholds needed adjusting? Was there room to add a 13th facility without rebuilding the scheduling logic from scratch? He treated the relationship the way you treat someone whose work you actually respect, like their time means something. For 5 years, monthly payments arrived on schedule. The system ran without failure. I'd get a call maybe twice a year when something at the facility level needed attention, and I'd either remote in or drive out and fix it. Clean, professional, no drama. Then Howard retired. January 2025, Diane Caldwell arrived 3 weeks later. I found out about the leadership change the same way I find out about most things in this business. Someone mentioned it in passing. A parts supplier I'd worked with for years called about something unrelated and said, "You hear Keystone brought in someone from outside?" Some executive from a consumer goods company. He said it the way you'd say you heard someone hired a plumber to rewire their electrical panel. I didn't think much of it at first. Leadership changes happen. What matters is whether the new person is smart enough to understand what they've inherited. The first email from Diane Caldwell arrived on a Thursday, before she'd been in the building 2 weeks. Subject: vendor cost review. It was 4 paragraphs of careful corporate language about recurring expense structures, third-party operational dependencies, and the need to evaluate alignment with current strategic priorities. No specific question, no direct challenge, just the kind of email that's designed to make you feel like you're being assessed. I replied professionally. Attached the original contract. Attached 60 months of system performance data, uptime percentages, error rates, maintenance cost comparisons against industry benchmarks. Numbers that made a clear case without me having to say a word. Her response came back within 2 hours. Please prepare full documentation of all operational systems for internal assessment and potential transition planning. Operational systems. That phrase told me everything I needed to know about where this was heading. She didn't see a custom-engineered infrastructure that had taken 20 months to build and required specialized knowledge to maintain. She saw a line item on a budget sheet and assumed she could move it in-house the same way you'd switch office supply vendors. I prepared documentation, but I also walked out to my garage that evening and spent an hour making sure everything was exactly where it needed to be. 10 days later, the next email arrived. Subject: intellectual property clarification. She wanted written confirmation that all operational software logic and system architecture developed under this engagement constituted intellectual property belonging to Keystone Fabrication Group. I didn't write a long response. I opened the contract, took a screenshot of Section 7, and sent it back. Bold text, impossible to misread. All system architecture, source code, design, logic, and operational infrastructure remains the exclusive property of Walter Briggs. Licensed in for operational use only. No transfer, replication, or derivative development permitted without explicit written authorization. Howard had read that clause carefully before he signed it. He'd even asked his legal team to review it, because Howard understood that you don't buy a custom automation system the way you buy a piece of equipment. You license access to something that took years to build and requires the person who built it to keep running. Diane Caldwell looked at that same clause and saw an obstacle. Her response came 6 hours later. Short, final. We will be transitioning to internal systems management effective immediately. Final payment will be processed per contract terms. Thank you for your service. That was the email I read on my phone at 7:14 a.m. on Tuesday, standing in my garage with a coffee in my hand. I set the phone down, looked at the control panel on the wall. Then I got to work, not on anything related to Diane Caldwell, but on her transition package. I spent most of that day building her exactly what she expected to receive: clean documentation, professional diagrams, interface screenshots showing the dashboard layouts, the monitoring panels, the scheduling displays. Everything polished and organized and formatted the way a proper handover package should look. It also contained nothing that would allow anyone to actually operate the system. What I sent her was a detailed, accurate, beautifully formatted map of the user interface, every screen, every display, every data visualization panel. What I did not send her was a single line of source code, a single PLC configuration file, or any reference to the hardware the entire system ran on, because none of that was covered under operational access. None of that was hers to receive. I attached it to an email with one line: system interface documentation provided per contract termination. Back-end infrastructure access not included per licensing agreement. Sent it at 5:47 p.m. Then I walked out to the garage, sat down in the chair I've had in front of that control panel for 6 years, and looked at 12 green indicators glowing steady across the monitor. Every facility running, every line synchronized, every welding robot moving in sequence. The entire Keystone network humming along exactly as designed, flowing through hardware in my garage that Diane Caldwell had no idea existed. I looked at the primary relay switch. Then I went inside and got a full night's sleep. Wednesday morning. Harbor Diner, corner booth, same table I've been coming to for 6 years. Margaret set my coffee down without asking and left me alone with my laptop. No cream, no sugar. I opened the operations monitor and pulled up the system dashboard, 9:46 a.m. Every indicator green, all 12 facilities synchronized. Line sequencing running clean. Predictive maintenance alerts updating in real time. Welding robots on line 3 moving through their cycles the way I programmed them to move 4 years ago. Smooth, precise, no deviation. I watched it for a couple of minutes. Then at 9:52 a.m., I reached across the keyboard and toggled the master relay switch. Every green indicator went gray. Real-time data feeds dropped to 0. PLC communication signals went silent across all 12 facilities simultaneously. The production scheduling engine stopped mid-cycle. The predictive maintenance alerts froze. The welding sequence on line 3 completed its current pass and then held waiting for instructions that weren't coming. I took a slow sip of coffee. The system didn't alarm. It didn't throw error codes or trigger warning lights on the floor. I designed it to disconnect cleanly, the way you'd close a door instead of kicking it in. The user interface at every facility would still load perfectly and display the last cached data. Green status lights, normal readings, everything appearing to function. But underneath that surface, nothing was talking to anything else. Diane Caldwell's IT team was now in possession of a very detailed, very professional photograph of a running engine. The engine itself was on a workbench in my garage. For the first 11 minutes, nobody noticed. That's the thing about a well-designed system. When it stops quietly. Operators at the facilities were looking at screens that told them everything was normal. And for those first minutes, the physical reality on the floor hadn't caught up yet. Trucks were finishing routes. Lines were completing their last queued cycles. The momentum of 5 years of smooth operation carried things forward a little longer than anyone expected. Then reality started catching up to the data. 10:03 a.m. A quality control checkpoint at the Allentown facility flagged a tolerance deviation on a batch coming off line 4. Under normal operation, that flag would have automatically paused the line, logged the batch number, and routed an alert to the shift supervisor's panel. Instead, the flag fired into a system that wasn't listening. The line kept running, the batch kept moving. 10:11 a.m. Line 3 welding robots at the Erie facility finished their last queued sequence and stopped. Just stopped. Arms held in position, waiting for updated instructions from a scheduling engine that had gone silent 19 minutes earlier. The floor supervisor walked over, looked at the control panel, saw green lights across the board, and assumed it was a local communication lag. He tried a manual refresh. Nothing. 10:19 a.m. 2 delivery trucks from separate facilities received the same dock assignment at the Harrisburg distribution point. The conflict prevention logic was offline. Both trucks showed confirmed valid assignments on their onboard displays. Both were heading to the same bay. My phone buzzed at 10:24 a.m. Ray Kowalski, shift foreman at the main Lancaster facility, 22 years on the floor, former welder, the kind of guy who understands the difference between what a screen says and what a machine is actually doing. Walter. His voice had that flat, careful quality, the one that means he's already looked at the problem from 3 angles and doesn't like any of them. Line 3 is holding, welding arms stopped, and they're not taking new sequences. I've got 2 conflict flags on dock assignments down in Harrisburg and a QC hold at Allentown that didn't trigger a line pause the way it should have. My board shows everything green. What's going on? I know what's going on. I said, tell Diane I'm at home. Silence for 3 seconds. Copy that, he said, and hung up. I ordered another coffee and watched my inbox. By 10:40 a.m., the emails were coming in every few minutes. Subject lines that started as casual questions, quick check on routing sync, and escalated steadily, as people began understanding that this wasn't a local glitch. One facility thinking they had a communication issue is a technical problem. 4 facilities simultaneously realizing their scheduling data hasn't updated in 50 minutes is something else entirely. 10:51 a.m. Urgent lines sequencing unresponsive across multiple sites, manual operations in effect, need guidance. 11:04 a.m. Critical. Dock conflicts at 3 distribution points. QC holds not triggering. Compliance flags accumulating, cannot reach system admin. My phone showed 24 missed calls by 11:15 a.m. I declined each one as it came in. I could see from the caller IDs that Diane's IT department had been trying every contact number they had on file for me. Office line, cell, and old email to SMS routing number I hadn't used in 2 years. At 21 a.m. Ray called again. Walter, it's getting worse. We're at 6 dock conflicts now across the network. Lancaster line 6 just went to manual because the operators don't trust the scheduling display anymore. They're right not to trust it. Someone's going to get hurt if heavy equipment keeps moving on bad assignments. He paused. I'm not asking you to fix it for free. I'm just telling you what's on the floor. I hear you, Ray. I'm working on the paperwork now. Another pause. She fired you, didn't she, this morning? He didn't say anything after that. Didn't need to. At 11:34 a.m., the damage estimate on my monitor crossed $18,700 in accumulated losses, delayed production runs, contractual penalties and compliance violations, manual labor overhead covering for automated systems that had gone dark, and an accelerating hourly burn that wasn't slowing down. The hourly rate was sitting at $19,400 and climbing. At 11:41 a.m., I opened a new document and started typing. Emergency restoration services, terms and conditions. Wire transfer only. Full payment confirmed before reactivation. Rate: 2.5 times the standard monthly service fee. Written acknowledgement of all intellectual property terms as stated in the original contract. No modifications, no partial payments, no negotiations on structure. I addressed it to Diane Caldwell, Keystone's legal department, and their operations director. Subject line: emergency restoration services available immediately. Sent it at 11:47 a.m. Then I closed my laptop, left a tip on the table, and drove home. At 12:43 p.m., a black sedan pulled into my driveway. I watched her through the side window before I opened the door. Black sedan still running. Diane Caldwell standing in my driveway in the same blazer she'd worn to fire me 5 hours ago, looking at my front door, then at the garage, then back at the front door. She had the posture of someone who'd spent the entire drive over rehearsing what she was going to say and was now realizing the setting wasn't what she'd pictured. She walked to the garage door and knocked. I let her knock twice. Then I opened it. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Behind her, the afternoon was flat and gray, the kind of February light that makes everything look exactly as serious as it is. We need to talk, she said. Come in. She stepped inside, and her eyes went immediately to the control panel on the back wall. I watched her take it in, the rack-mounted PLC interfaces, the rows of terminal blocks, the signal wiring running in neat bundles to labeled circuit boards. The monitors showing 12 gray indicators where there should have been green. It was one thing to hear that a contractor owned the infrastructure. It was another thing to stand in front of the hardware and understand that the entire operating nervous system of your company had been running out of someone's garage for 5 years, on equipment they built with their own hands, and you never knew it existed. She stood there long enough that I didn't need to say anything. This is it, she said finally. Not a question, This is it. She turned to face me. Whatever she'd planned to open with, she'd set it aside. The wire transfer is being processed. Legal confirmed it 20 minutes ago. It should clear within the hour. When it clears, I'll restore 45 minutes to full operation across all 12 facilities. She nodded once. Then, the new contract, my terms, 3 years, annual review. Ownership language is the same as the original. No room for interpretation this time. Your legal team can read it as many times as they want. Nothing gets changed. She looked at me for a moment. I could see her working through it, not the negotiation. That was already over, but something else. Something she was deciding whether to say. Howard told me, she said, before he left. He said the system was the most important operational asset the company had, and that the relationship with you was not a vendor relationship. I thought he was being sentimental. He wasn't being sentimental. No, she said. He wasn't. That was the whole conversation. She walked back to her sedan and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. I watched the car until it turned the corner. Then I sat down in front of the control panel. My banking app chimed at 1:38 p.m. Wire transfer confirmed. Amount correct. I put my hand on the primary relay switch and flipped it to active position. The monitors came alive one screen at a time. Facility by facility, green indicators replacing gray. Lancaster first, then Erie, then Allentown, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and on down the line until all 12 were lit. PLC signals reconnecting. Line sequencing resuming, the welding robots on line 3 receiving updated instructions and beginning to move. Dock assignment conflicts clearing as the scheduling engine came back online and sorted the queue. Quality control checkpoints reactivating. Predictive maintenance data flowing again, the whole network back up in 41 minutes. I called Ray Kowalski. Systems restored, I said. All 12 facilities. I heard him exhale. Yeah, I can see it. Lines are coming back. A pause, the sound of the floor behind him, machinery waking up, the particular hum of a facility returning to normal operations. We're going to be running double shifts to catch up on the backlog. I know. Sorry about that. Don't apologize to me, he said. I've been waiting 3 months for someone to explain to her what she actually had. Took a long way around, but she got there. Another pause. You going to be okay, Walter? I'm fine, Ray. Good. Buy yourself a decent dinner. I sat in the garage for a while after that. Didn't go back inside right away. Just sat in the chair and watched the monitors. 12 green lights. Steady. The way they'd been for 5 years before this morning outside. The February light was fading. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere a few blocks over, a dog was barking at something and then stopping. I thought about Howard Nolan. About the afternoon he called me, 2019. His voice carrying that particular weight of a man who's run out of solutions. About the handshake in his office after I'd walked the floor and told him what I could do. About 5 years of quarterly calls where he asked good questions and listened to the answers. He'd understood from day one what the contract meant and why it was structured the way it was. Not because he was a lawyer or a technical expert, but because he was a man who'd spent 28 years learning that the people who actually build things are the ones who understand them. The new contract arrived 3 weeks later. Every clause exactly as I'd written it. No edits, no modifications, no corporate wordsmithing. The signature on the last page was Patricia Norwood, VP of Strategic Operations, someone Keystone had brought in specifically to handle the aftermath. Diane Caldwell's name was nowhere on the document. I printed it, read it once, signed it, and sent it back. By the end of that month, inquiry emails had come in from companies in Detroit, Cleveland, and Columbus, all asking variations of the same question. Are you taking on new systems development work? Word travels slow in manufacturing, but it travels far, and it travels honest. I opened my laptop and started a new document, 2025 Standard Service Agreement, Walter Briggs Industrial Controls Consulting. If you've spent years building something real with your hands, your time, your specific knowledge that nobody else has, remember this. The value lives in the understanding, not in the output. Protect what you create before someone forces you to defend it. Read every clause. Know the difference between licensing access and surrendering ownership. And when someone decides that what you built belongs to them, don't raise your voice. Don't make it personal. Just make sure your contract says exactly what it means, and let the work speak for itself. The foundation was solid. Time to build the next level. The woman with the Harvard MBA flew across 3 states to stand in my garage and ask me to please turn her factories back on. Turns out the most powerful position in any room isn't the one on the org chart, it's the one holding the relay switch.